Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching Indus News, and this is the Afghanistan special transmission of the post-withdrawal. And now there is no foreign occupation on Afghanistan. And now we have to talk on this. Now we have with us in studio Air Marshal Masood Akhtar. He's a defense analyst. And also joining us is James Dorsey, Fahim Sadat and Ravi Srivastava from India. Now, I'd like to begin the discussion with Air Marshal Masood Akhtar, defense analyst. Now, we have been talking about this issue, sir, now, and there is no foreign occupation in Afghanistan right now, and the situation, as we were discussing earlier, it's very complex. Now, do you think the Taliban will be able to govern Afghanistan, obviously converting from a military power to a political power?
Very complex, complicated and foggy. And now that there are celebrations in Afghanistan, they deserve it because they've come back after 20 years. But we need to be very careful, especially here in Pakistan, because once the pressure of governance comes, please look at Pakistan. We are a decent enough democracy, but we have difficulties. We have polarization. In case of, and we don't have the kind of Sharia that they are wanting to exercise. In case we continue to bank on the same model, as of now, the Taliban have shown remarkable restraint. And at the tactical level, not at the tactical level, but strategic and operational level, at the tactical level, there have been excesses. But when it comes to governance and they have to provide gas and electricity, water, facilities, education, health, and a population that is used to 21st century facilities, they are going to protest. And what are they going to do at that time? Time is going to tell, but it's going to be very difficult, and they could err, there could be pressures, and that is when they could fall back to their basic instincts, which is suppression, because that's the only thing they know. Till now, they only know how to fight wars. They had their model 20 years back that was based pure on suppression. This time the vibes are very good, and I think the Pakistan government played some definite good role in this, that they are showing a huge restraint. They've given amnesty to everyone. They're not killing people, especially in Kabul. But in Asadabad, Jalalabad, there have been protests. They've killed one or two musicians, comedians. That is not a good sign, because the tactical level may not be under their entire control. When the problems come, well, things could start to fall apart. We hope and pray that it doesn't, but that is when Pakistan should also start to get worried, because of the allegation that we've been supporting them, we've been shaping them. Wrong, absolutely false, but that is what the perceptions are, and Pakistan will then have a hard time defending this.
Absolutely, and obviously the situation is complex. Now, James, I want you to comment on this. Obviously, it's been 16 days now since the Afghan, they haven't been able to form a government, Afghanistan now. And their demand was that we will announce the formation of government after there is completely no foreign occupants in our country now. So now that has taken place, when can we expect of forming a government in Afghanistan?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm in a position to be able to predict when they will do this. I would argue, however, it's not that it may not be a question of not being able to form a government. I think there are obvious reasons why it would not want to form a government as long as foreign forces are on Afghan territory. It's only now, less than 24 hours that there are no foreign forces. So, in a sense, I'll give them a break on this. The other thing that I do think speaks for the Taliban is the fact that they have not rushed to form a government, but that they have reached out to various parties, Abdullah, Hamid Karzai, Hekmat Yar, and others. That's a good sign. The question, of course, is once they do announce a government, and assuming that there will be non-Taliban figures in it, how much power do those non-Taliban figures have, and or are they just token figures? So we'll have to wait and see that. The other thing I want to comment on is an earlier remark that you made in the question, which was the transition from a political force to a military force. I think the Taliban are going to be both. First of all, at this point, there is no Afghan military, or there are remnants of the Afghan military, and there is the insurgent force. So they're going to have to build or rebuild the Afghan military. Second of all, Afghanistan never was a state that had a monopoly on violence or a monopoly on weapons, and it's not going to be that now. Now, it obviously, when it is going to be confronting its violent adversaries, first and foremost the Islamic State, it obviously will have the power of the state behind it. But we'll have to see on how they structure that fight. So I think, you know, the question really is going to be, the Taliban right now need to create legitimacy. They need to create credibility, because that is what is going to enable them to start tackling what are Afghanistan's serious problems.
Absolutely. Now, Ravi, welcome. And Ravi, I want to ask you, now, what is the situation and the atmosphere in India, and how does India see Afghanistan without any foreign occupation there, and how is India going to plan its dealing with the Taliban in the near future? We have seen Indian media, obviously, misleading information, but on the government stage, how do you see that?
Mubin, just now, I think, and a few hours before, India has read the Riot Act to Taliban. That first time, you know, after 20 years, the US army, the last troop, has left the soil of Afghanistan. 20 years before, they came to protect Afghans from Talibanis, and 20 years later, they have left Afghanistan, leaving the Taliban more stronger and organized than ever before. Now, as far as the Taliban claims are concerned, I think we have to recall a few days before that attack, the drone attack on where 170 Afghans and almost 13 US troopers were killed. So people don't take Taliban's good gestures and a good vibe so easily. It will be a very difficult situation in Afghanistan and Taliban to impress upon the whole world that they mean a better business this time. I do not know. As far as India is concerned, there are a lot of resistance, but there is a section in India which supports Taliban. It is for sure. A few people, they have welcomed the actions. They have welcomed their taking over the reins of the Afghanistan. But I think it will be a very, very, tough task ahead, because I have seen the pictures of Kabul University and other parts of the Kabul city and other state parts where a different life was there altogether. Now, if they are going to rate the strict Sharia and all Islamic caliphate on the people, it will be a definite resistance, and it's a war in the civilization, I would say. This is how it is perceived across the other countries in the world. So we have to wait and see how things change in Afghanistan. Definitely, Taliban have extended the olive branch to government of India also, that they want a good relations with Indians, they want a good relation with government of India, but I don't know how far the government will accept it and how it will be perceived by the rest of the nation in India, because Taliban have got entirely a different image in this country.
Right, Rafi, you said the Taliban have already extended the olive branch to Indian government that they want peace. But now, if keeping this in mind, since 15th of August, this seems to be a frustration in India. I do not understand what that is. Obviously, the Taliban say they want peace in the entire region and they also want good relations with India, as you also mentioned now. But there is a comment of the defense minister who also said the country needs to upgrade itself now. Also help us understand what does that comment mean, keeping in this situation in your mind, and also about the misinformation campaigns that the Indian media is running, which is obviously sponsored and allowed by the state.
A couple of months before, Indian MEA, that Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, had a meeting with the Taliban representatives somewhere in Doha, and an agreement was drawn over there. Now the MEA says that the particular agreement has not been followed in letter and spirit by the Taliban. So they don't know that how far that the serious trust deficit at the moment. There are other fears also in the part of India, especially in Kashmir, where the Article 370 and 35A were abrogated some 2 years before. Also feel that with the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, will be supporting the cause of the Kashmiris and the Hurriyat people and others. Apart from that, there in Kerala, a lot of people are joining the ISIS. You must have heard these news also. And as the US statement is concerned today, they have said that though they have vacated the territory of Afghanistan, they will continue to fight against the ISIS and other terrorist groups. They have not named Taliban at all in their press statement. So all these things are very confusing. The situation is fluid. Let's see that how it takes a turn finally. Yeah.
Ravi, I don't think the situation is confusing now. I'm going to have Masood Akhtar on this now. Mr. Akhtar, the situation obviously doesn't seem confusing, as Ravi said, when it comes to India deciding whether it wants peace with the neighbors or not. Obviously, we know India for a fact has been sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan, and we also caught the spy Kulbhushan Yadav. We can all remember that. The world acknowledged that, and India failed to also hide that fact now, and which it accepts now. But keeping all of this thing in mind, Indian media is playing a misinformation campaign against the Taliban in Afghanistan. I think it's quite clear that India does not want to see peace in Afghanistan. Mr. Akhtar, this is for you. So,
okay. You were looking at the screen, so I thought there is another Akhtar also. I think Ravi has been, all credit to him, he has been very realistic and truthful. Indian channels otherwise are almost having a war out there on the screen, especially Arnab Goswami show, which is the mouthpiece of BJP. They are playing havoc with the relations between the two countries. The point to note is that India-Pakistan relations have always been played out in the context of Afghanistan and Kashmir. These are the two areas. India has lost out a lot. An investment down the drain worth $3 billion has just been wasted away. But the Taliban have extended a good olive branch to them. And Ravi is right that time alone is going to tell as to how the Taliban behave, let's say a month from now. That is going to determine how the game goes on in South Asia between India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. As of now, the Indians are not trusting the Taliban at all. And of course, they are talking to Pakistan. And we must remember that India and Pakistan did not talk on their own. They were nudged by the Americans, number one, because they wanted a peaceful South Asia in the backdrop of the drawdown, and number two, they wanted that Pakistan and India should be able to contribute to stability in Afghanistan, and that should be a national security interest number one between India, Pakistan, Iran, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, China, and even Russia. And I think that is what is being worked on. What the Indians ought to do now is that keep this vital national security interest up front, and then talk to the neighbors and not only hope for the best but work for the best. Once the Afghans have extended the olive branch, they also had a talk with they had talks in Doha that were sponsored by the Qataris. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, they also have been nudging India and Pakistan into talking to one another. We have had a ceasefire along. So I think that's a good news for people in South Asia. In the backdrop of Afghanistan, Pakistan must wait and see, and that's what our government has clearly said. If they are able to put together a multilateral coalition together in the government, that will be sign number one. Number two, that they are able to govern well. Number three, they don't permit a civil war. In terms of civil wars, two things are in the offing. Number one, the ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, who are further right in terms of orientations in Sharia, they don't agree with the Taliban, who are nationalists, national in approach, and Daesh, ISIL, ISIS are international. They are likely to clash. So there could be a civil war in terms of religious belief. That is number one. That the Taliban must control. And number two, a civil war based on ethnicity, that is with the Tajiks in the north, which is already brewing. So India is also wanting to watch out on this. Pakistan also wanting to look out for stability, and that the Taliban are able to govern Afghanistan well, and they are wanting to help out. Where are the spoilers? Because once Ahmad Shah Massoud's son, who is Massoud Ahmad, he and of course with 2-3 other people, when they put up the resistance, who all are ready to who support them? The Tajiks, the Uzbeks, and in case the Taliban are not able to govern well, the Russian and the Chinese might jump in. As of now, everybody will wait and see in South Asia, except India, that once they are able to put together a good enough coalition, number one, and number two, start to govern well, I think the South Asian nations may accord some kind of recognition, and that is the time when Pakistan will also go in and recognize. And I think that is what is going to control the behavior of the other states, that is Europe, America, but especially India. So we need to look out for these symptoms rather than mudslinging that is coming from the Indian government onto the Taliban and onto Pakistan, especially Arnab Goswami and company. They are not doing any good to stability and peace in South Asia, and Modi government should better be mindful of this.
And just to add on this, I was on Arnab Goswami's program a few days back, and obviously they couldn't let me speak because I was speaking the truth and the facts, and they always muted my mic and they lowered my audio. And the fact that the senseless statements coming out of Arnab Goswami were that Pakistan is sponsoring terrorism in Afghanistan to destabilize Pakistan itself. So I think this statement is enough to analyze and to identify that Arnab Goswami, the most famous anchor in India and the warmonger, needs urgent medical care. Well, now moving on this now, James, I want you to come into this debate now. We're talking about the role of India in the region and especially in Afghanistan.
Well, look, I don't want to be drawn into what is essentially an Indian-Pakistani dispute. I've listened to both your guests, and with all due respect, I think it's the pot blaming the kettle. With other words, it's not one side that is at fault here and another side that is not. I think both parties engage in sponsorship of violence, both parties engage in disinformation, and that's part of the way conflicts are fought out, certainly with enhanced technology. What I do think is that as a matter of principle, first of all, I think what's got to see exactly what the Taliban said about India. And it was very specific. It was that the Taliban would like to maintain trade and good relations with India. They were very clear in how they delineated what they wanted that relationship to be. In some ways, they've been more concrete in the way they want to, what they've said in how they want to structure their relationship with India than they have been, for example, in terms of speaking about how they want to structure their relationship with Pakistan. Now, to be fair again to the Taliban, the statement on India was one of the very few more specific statements made by a member of the Taliban with regard to foreign policy. Much of it has been in generalities until now. So we may well get statements, I'm sure we will get statements on Pakistan as we move forward. But having said all of this, I would argue that as a matter of principle, Pakistan and India have common interests in Afghanistan. And the interest is that Afghanistan remains a stable country. But as long as both Pakistan and India look at Afghanistan as a battlefield in their own bilateral conflict, you're not doing yourselves any good, you're not doing Afghanistan any good, you're not doing the region any good.
Right, James. Now we have Maria Sultan with us in the special transmission. She is a defense analyst. Now, welcome, Maria. Now, Maria, we're talking about India's role in peace, obviously, in the region and in Afghanistan for the focus of the discussion right now. And as we have seen lately, misinformation campaigns by the Indian media sponsored by the state of India. How do you see India treating the Afghanistan under the Taliban in the future?
I think for the first time, New Delhi is in a real predicament because it would now have to decide that its policy in Afghanistan has to be pro-Afghanistan. It doesn't have to be linked to one group. And if they are going to be linked to one group and they think that this is all what Afghanistan is to represent, then perhaps they would not be key interlocutors in the future of Afghanistan's military, security, or economic dispensation. Now, this would mean that all the investment which India has done up till now will be put in a very different color. Because one thing is for sure, I don't think that the new Taliban regime or a new Taliban-led government will be very accommodative of India's overarching role in, say, for example, in NDS or for that matter in other places. They would like to maintain that function for themselves. And it's not just for Pakistan or India or any of the other countries. Because that is something which will perhaps define how strongly they will evolve as a group, what they will do, and how strongly the government will function. Because let's see the facts on grounds. The facts on grounds are that there is a bigger question mark with regards to the future of Afghanistan's economic, political, and military security. How is that going to be ensured? One. Number two, what happens to the Afghan people? What are their expectations of the Afghan state for the future? And number three, but I think what is very amply visible in the last 2 or 3 days is the threat of ISIS and other non-state actors which are also there. So if they are really going to combat this as a major threat to the Afghan state in the future, then they would need to take out at least a fresh look with regards to military contractors, towards external agencies which use Afghanistan as their backyard for their regional proxies. So if this is to be rewritten, and they need to be, the top dogs, the top dog in the country, then I think India would also have to revisit this policy. Because if it doesn't, then I don't think that it will become a major player in Afghanistan for the future.
Right now, Ravi, let's jump into the debate with you now. We've heard the comments of all our guests here now. Also comment on the debate right now and also tell us now, India had been supporting the Afghan government backed by the United States. Now, is the Indian government going to work with the Taliban? Ravi, can you hear me? Ravi?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I don't think that so far Indian government has been receptive to any Taliban's any approach. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, in past India had been very supportive. They have already had a number of investments over there, and they made even the parliament for the Afghans in Kabul. So India had invested a lot over there. When the US was occupying that territory, US was present in their territory. But I don't think that so far when the Taliban, unless they prove themselves to be good at governance, and all kind of peace is restored in Afghanistan, I'm apprehensive that India will do any further, diplomatic relations with a Taliban-led government in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Right. Also, now, Masood Saab, we have seen. Right now in front of me is a picture of the New York Times in which it states documents reveal US officials misled the public on the war in Afghanistan. Now, the Biden administration claims they achieved all the objectives, and the Taliban say they defeat the United States.
I have been a student of national security and security policy and strategy, and let me update your viewers that when Obama came up with the national security policy in 2009 for Afghanistan and Pakistan, he set out 3 objectives: disrupt, dismantle, defeat, not destroy, and that's what, and occupy every inch of Afghanistan, not do that kind of counterinsurgency operations. Robert Gates, as the defense secretary, he derived a policy of what is called control, hold, build, and transfer. Hillary Clinton went ahead and she, of course, could only build and transfer. Mullen, he said, this is Mullen, who was the chairman, Joint Chiefs at that time. He said, this is not going to be classic counterinsurgency where they occupy every inch of Afghanistan, which George W. Bush had ordained. And in the end, McChrystal, he said, as the local commander, General McChrystal, he said, we are going to occupy only the main lines of communication and main population center, control, hold, build, and transfer. Now, I believe that they were able to achieve these 4 and disrupt, dismantle, defeat. They did indicate to the Taliban and to Al-Qaeda that in their mind they had defeated them. Where was the problem? They also had set a condition that by the year 2011, that means within 2 to 3 years, they will prepare Afghan national security forces to completely take over the security and help the government establish itself. That is what they miserably failed to do. The entire, all 4 elements were underpinned by this one statement: prepare, arm, train, and make them capable of taking over security of Afghanistan. What they created was only probably a counter-terrorism force which was to be helped all along by a very potent, very potent air power. The moment that air power was removed, not only that these people were representing a polarized Afghanistan, not a stable, good nation, so they did not truly own. They did not truly own the country and own the war. But the moment air power was taken away from them, they stopped fighting. Number 2, obviously, they were also bribed. There are news that the Afghans, they went and the Taliban went and they convinced them to give up, so they gave up. So they had achieved the ends of policy that Obama had given only to the extent, but the main rider clause that applied to each one of them, that Afghan national security forces should be capable. Now, where did Biden go wrong? He, all along, when he said, and he'd been thinking about this during his vice presidency with Obama, that he's going to pull out the forces and bring this ever-going war to an end. When he decided to do that, I think that's what the observers also agree, he stopped listening to the Pentagon. Not that Pentagon was doing any favor to themselves by saying that we want to stay there, but I think they were absolutely right. Afghan national security forces were just not ready to take over. So they collapsed, and the blowback has now to be absorbed by Pakistan, by India, by Russia, by China, and we all are holding our breaths as to whether the Afghan Taliban will be able to govern, will they give a stable Afghanistan. Everybody around, Europe is away, America is away, but South Asia and Asia and all the people around, like Ravi said, one of your commentators said, number 1 security interest is a stable, democratic, at some stage, prosperous Afghanistan, if that doesn't come about, it's going to pose a big danger and a big problem for everyone.
And when we are talking about prosperity of Afghanistan, there is a comment by Suhail Shaheen, who said that China can play a constructive role and a positive role in the reconstruction and economic development in Afghanistan. Now, Maria, I want you to comment on this.
Well, I think China will be perhaps one of the biggest economic stabilizers for Afghanistan, because the real question over here is this, that if Afghanistan is to really transform from a war economy towards a progressive economy, the regional states, most importantly, the new emerging economic powers would have to put in their share for the economic security. In this case, as we are well aware, right now, China has got one mineral excavation deal, which is true so far. It just is almost amounting to $30 billion. So that is just one mine. Now this is just one potential. And if you look at the mineral reserves of Afghanistan, you're talking about trillions of dollars of money available. Unfortunately, up till now, in the last 20 years, the only investment which was done in Afghanistan was in security and counterterrorism and taking initiatives against counterinsurgency. It was never around state building. Had it been around state building, we would have seen a different level of Afghan state and a different level of their state stability. And what's worst is this, that as this evacuation process progressed further, most of the bureaucratic elite and those people who were actually holding different state functions within the Afghan state have also fled the country. That has created a power vacuum and a capacity vacuum. So this is where China, Pakistan, and other regional countries can play a very constructive role, because we will have to make a choice, and the world would have to make a choice. And that is that, are we going to invest in the peace in Afghanistan, or are we going to go for instability and a perpetuating security crisis in Afghanistan? Because let's not forget two things about Afghanistan. One, that the Taliban had remained in power in the 1990s, and they remained in power not for 1 day, 2 days, but they remained in power for a decade. Now, at that time, they did not take money from drugs, because that was one of the major issues. They brought down the drug sales from Afghanistan to almost zero. But now, as the United States has exited Afghanistan, and so is the NATO forces, the drug trade stands around at almost $1 trillion a year. So this is the money which is already there, and this money will remain there unless and until we are able to transform the economic relationship of the new government in Kabul towards trade linkages, towards capacity building, towards some kind of resource development. Now, if the industry cannot be put in, then perhaps minerals, trade connectivity could become the order of the day. And that's where China's Belt and Road Initiative and these initiatives can be a positive development. Now, will the Chinese go ahead, given the fact that Afghanistan's security will still be a question mark, is another question. That will be the real test of the Chinese also, in terms of whether or not they're actually invested in regional stability, and for that, how much price they're willing to pay. And last but not least, it's also going to be a bigger question mark for all those countries which have been investing in state building to whatever degree in Afghanistan in the last 20 years. Whether it is European countries, whether it's some of the US development agencies and others, then what investment will they continue to do? If the $9.2 billion, which are right now frozen in the US accounts, become a new reality, the government will function. The only problem is that it may not function on aid, it may not function on these checks and balances. So it's a measure of control and the measure of the future nature and character of the Afghan state, which we're all hoping will remain standing. So here, your question, whether China can play a role, yes, China can play a very constructive role. Will that be something which would be welcome? It will be a question with regards to how efficiently the Taliban regime puts its government in motion and keeps it in action. Let's not forget they are perhaps the only group which remained in power for more than almost a decade in Afghanistan without any help. Now, this is the new reformed 2.0 model of the Taliban regime. The question is this: will this 2.0 model be more progressive? Yes. They negotiated with the world. They negotiated their way to victory. And this is very rare that an armed group actually negotiates its way to victory and then decides when it will come into power. They came into Kabul almost a month ago. They're going to declare the government in the coming week. The nature, character, And the future discourse will depend in terms of how smartly they negotiate the future and the new economic terms of engagement with the regional countries.
Right, Marian, that's a perfect analysis. Now, James, I want your comment on the future role of China in the region, because obviously the Taliban seem like they trust the Chinese more right now.
Well, I think in principle, Mariam is right with a number of caveats. China's going to wait and see, as are others. China is less risk averse than it was in the past. Also, I think there's a litmus test, or a potential litmus test for China, which nobody has really spoken about, but is fairly logical. And that is, China across the globe has repeatedly demanded that countries extradite Uyghurs. And in a number of cases, Thailand, Malaysia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Uyghurs, whether there was reason for the extradition or not, were extradited. There is no reason why one of the first things that China would demand from Afghanistan is that it hand over whatever Uyghur fighters are in the country. And that's going to put the Taliban in a real bind. So I think that ultimately there's some hoops that the Taliban have to go through. But if they do go through those hoops, they will find a fairly open door in China.
Now, Ravi, coming to you now, obviously keeping China in mind in the region, and now that the Taliban are seeking and they want the Chinese to build infrastructure and help the Taliban grow and obviously stabilize Afghanistan. And also keeping this in mind, we also know that there was a time when India wanted to be the tiger in the region, which obviously did not work out for them as they have invested heavily. But keeping China in mind, how does India take this?
India has expressed their criticism on various platforms about China being an expansionist, whether it is South China Sea, whether it is Sri Lanka, a Hampankota port, and many places, Chabahar port, or that BRI road. So China will be too keen to invest in Afghanistan on developing the infrastructure and all those the major projects over there. But India has been very critic of this Chinese attempt and has protested it in several forums. But this is a truth. This is a fact that a country which is economically strong and has got billions of dollars to invest, they will definitely go in for that kind of investment in any country in the region to have their hold over there, and finally that kind of hold will be converting to political hold as well. So China will be too keen to invest over there, and they will continue to do it. Yeah.
So, all right now, so obviously China does play a very important role in the region. Now, just before we close this, want the last and a few last and quick comments of all our guests here. Now, Masood Akhtar, we have seen a very complex situation, 20 years in Afghanistan. We've seen occupants. Now that Afghanistan is free of occupants. Very shortly, your last comments about Afghanistan and the coming situation.
The problem, I will quickly go through this. These are not my comments, but a statement by ex-governor in Kabul. In the year 2020, GDP growth contracted by nearly 2%. Urban poverty rose by 6 percentage points. Inflation, 3 percentage points. Food prices skyrocketed. By April, 5.5 million Afghans were experiencing emergency levels of food insecurity. What he further predicts is next 1 year, currency devaluations, more inflation, higher food prices, plummeting government revenues. Meaning thereby, I wish to indicate to your viewers that the problems are going to be gigantic. The Taliban are not experienced enough. Maximum money doesn't come from China except when China gains its own profits out of it, because they're doing CPEC and OBOR for profit. and they would like the Uyghurs to get out of the way, which Chinese have tended to say to Pakistan, TTP is your problem. So we will have to wait and see as to how much they're able to do. IMF, World Bank, $9.5 billion, they're not going to give any more money. So Taliban will have to do well. I think it's going to be tough and difficult. We will have to wait and see.
We will have to wait and see. Maria, last comments.
I would just beg to differ a little bit. I think the Taliban would have access to money, much more money than we anticipate. Because let's not forget, there's lots of weapons, lots of drugs which are still in the country, and they've gone nowhere. So the real question here is for the region and for the world to understand that whether we transform Afghanistan into a normal state, and if we are going to help Afghanistan transform to a normal state, then lots of work has to be done.
Lots of work has to be done. Now, Ravi, if you have to add anything very quickly, Ravi, if you have to add anything.
I just want to say one line only, that I am in agreement with the Blinken's statement today that Taliban will have to earn international legitimacy. I think that's a moot point at this moment. How they perform, how they govern, how they rule the nation, I think it will be visible in the forthcoming quarter, and that will decide the fate of that particular government and their international recognition.
Right, right. And lastly, James, very shortly.
I think that one of the geopolitical realities that the international community as such and the Taliban in Afghanistan will have to face is that for all practical purposes, the United States has not just withdrawn from Afghanistan, it's withdrawn from Central Asia. And if you look at the remarks,
the United States have not just withdrawn from Afghanistan, but they have withdrawn from Central Asia. This was special mission on Afghanistan, obviously after post-withdrawal. Now, we are seeing Afghanistan without foreign occupation after 20 years, and the Taliban have a lot of work to do ahead. This is Muneeb Hamid signing off. Take care.